Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and welcome to part two of my tutorial for the coding assignment on the Easy University case. And this is the coding assignment for authorization and admin. And okay, here's what we're going to do in part two. Uh, we're going to add groups, users, and permissions so that we've got some kind of content to power the login and the logout that we created in part one. Okay? So the first thing we need to do is we need groups, right? Groups are a typical part of a modern permission scheme. And that's because it's too much trouble to give permission to individual users. It's too error prone. So what we usually do is when we do the design of the system, we usually define roles that users can take on. And then based on those roles, we create a group with that role name. And then we give that group the permissions that are appropriate for that role. So then later, when we add users, we simply put them in the group that has the permissions appropriate for them. Okay, so it's not typical in modern system administration to give individual application system permissions to individual users, only indirectly through giving them to groups. Okay, so we're going to create some groups. So what groups do we need? Well, I have created for you a marvelous document that summarizes the groups that we are going to have in the Course Info app. Okay, so we're going to create three groups. Course Info, it's going to be abbreviated CI underscore users for Course Info user, CI underscore scheduler, and CI underscore registrar. Okay, so what's a user? Well, a user is somebody who is going to be working in this part of our operations who can look up information. Okay, so they are not going to be able to add information. They're not going to be able to change information. They're not going to be able to delete information. They're only going to be able to view it. Okay. So they're, some kind of helper, some kind of a clerk or something like that. Okay, I've got two roles that are, I think, appropriate for this app. One is a scheduler. This is a person who's going to schedule instructors and courses. And pretty typically in an academic department, there is a person or persons who are responsible for the schedule, and they add courses to the schedule and instructors to the schedule, and they do all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's what a scheduler is going to be for us. A registrar is going to be a person who either adds students or registers students for courses, which in our system means that they can add or they can change or they can delete registrations. So what I've got here is we have all these model classes. We got two that aren't really very visible in our Course Info application, period and year, but I want to make sure we give proper permission for those. And then we've got the model classes that we can manipulate directly in the course info app, which are semester, course, section, instructor, student, and then on the next page, registration. Okay? So, the way we want to set things up is if you're just a normal user, if you're just some kind of a clerk who answers questions for people and that kind of stuff, maybe you're a part-time student employee and people want to know information. Well, you can view all these things. You can view the period, the year, the semester, the course, the section, the instructor, the student, and the registration. You can view all those things. Okay. If you're a scheduler, you have complete authority over everything but students and registration. So you can do all of the activities, and the permissions that make sense are view, add, change, and delete. Now, something we're going to work on when we get to part 3, when we are incorporating these permissions into our Django app, is it's interesting. The permission scheme for Django, the names of the permissions are view, add, change, delete. Okay, those aren't exactly the names that are used on the views. Okay, so we'll have that excitement in part 3. But in part 2, it's pretty easy to understand what we mean by view, add, change, and delete, right? And we're saying that the scheduler can do that for all of these model classes except the student and the registration, right? So they are only going to be able to do on student and registration, they're going to be able to view just like a normal user, but they aren't going to be able to add, change, or delete. The registrar is going to be kind of the inverse of the scheduler, okay? And I realize that I've got a couple of check marks that I've got to put on here. The registrar should be able to view all these things. I just updated this. So imagine in your mind that the registrar can view. In fact, I'm just going to go change that right now. I'm going to pause, and it's going to be magically changed. And like magic, I have fixed that problem. So the registrar can view period and year, although those aren't visible within Course Info. They are visible in the admin app. Semester, course, section, instructor, and then they can do all of the operations, view, add, change, and delete on student and registration. Okay? So that's how we're going to set this up. We're going to set up the groups, and then we're going to set up the users and assign them to the groups, and then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up the group permissions. Now, one thing I have over here to the right, okay, super users can do anything. Okay, we've already created super users in the past. You probably know that we want to be very conservative about how many super users we create. Okay, because a super user in Django, they can create new users and they can change and delete. So they can do all 4 of these operations on users. So they can do some pretty powerful stuff. In addition to that, they have all the application powers. So they truly are a super user, right? So we're eventually going to create a system admin user when we create the users, and we're just going to say they're a super user. And that's going to allow them to do anything at all. Okay? That wouldn't be your typical user. That would be a very special person. Okay, so this is the scheme. I've included this document um, in your list of resources associated with this assignment. So you ought to be able to get this and refer to it. Okay? Alrighty. How are we going to do that? Well, we are going to do that with a migration. Okay? So far, where are we with the migrations? Well, we're up through migration 10, load student test data, and it's still testing, so we want to leave that there. So what I'm going to do is, out of my already baked version, I'm going to copy my next migration, which is migration 11, and it's called create groups. Okay? And the groups, this is the classic data migration program. Okay? So when we did the migrations section, we created a couple of them. I think I had you create at least one. At least you followed along with me. So the design of these is something that I copied from somebody. I'm going to say probably Pinkham. Okay? And I refined. And this particular one, let's stop this server nonsense and let's get a little bit of room to see the code. Okay, so what goes on in here? Well, it turns out that in the database, in the model, in with the built-in app called Auth, there is a model class called group. Okay, and we haven't used it yet. Okay, we'll see it in a bit in the admin app, right? And so what we want to do is we want to add 3 groups. Could we do this by hand? Yeah, we could have done this by hand, but I wanted to make sure that you were able to load all of these things in a coordinated way. Okay, so we're creating 3 groups. The column on group, it has an ID and has a name, and they are CI user, CI scheduler, CI registrar. Those are our 3 groups. Okay. Do we have to create a super user group? No. Super users are a special class of user in the Django user authentication and authorization infrastructure. So they're not a group. They're a special kind of user. Okay? Okay, and we've got one operation, a run Python, just like we do in all of our data migrations. And the forward version is called add group data, and the reverse, the backout, is remove group data. Okay. And so what do we do in add group data? Well, we get get a reference to the model class for the group model class in the auth app, and then we go around and we create a group for each of the dictionaries that I have in my list of groups. And that means that we create CI user, CI scheduler, CI registrar. Okay, so let's go look at let's use SQLite Studio to get a look at our database. Okay, and I've been playing in the practice database, but now we're in the production one. So I'm going to refresh that schema, and I'm going to look at auth groups. Okay, so let's look at auth group as an ID and a name, and I'm going to go to the tab for data. Nothing in there, no groups. Okay, well, we're going to change that when we run this. Okay, so let's crank up. Sorry, let's get to the right part. Go to Tools, run manage.py. Okay, let's show migrations. Okay, and you can see that for course info, we haven't run migration 11 yet. Okay, that's good. Let's run it. Let's say migrate course info 0012. I'm sorry. I'm getting eager. We'll have a 0012, but we're not there yet. Okay, so 0011, 11. That's the one we just created. There we are. We applied it. Okay, now it says that it ran fine. Let's just confirm by looking in the database. Here it is. So come back to SQLite Studio, refresh, and we see we've got 3 rows in that table now. CI user, CI scheduler, CI registrar. That's perfect. That's just what we need. Okay, now as long as we're doing that, let's go run the server and see if we can see them in the admin app. Okay, so let's go to the admin app. Admin. And these are, right now, the only user that you should have is tester. So let's go to tester. And we're giving all these test users the same password, which is lowercase secret in parens. Okay, and we're in. Okay, and if you look, as part of the authentication and authorization app, we have users, which in this case we only have a tester, right? But the other thing that we've had all along were groups, but we didn't have anything in it. But now we've got 3 groups. Okay, and if you go down and you look at groups, let's look at those. You can see that groups have permissions. So these are all the permissions that we can add. Okay, they're in a table called auth permissions, and you can see that for one of our model classes, say student, we have add, change, delete, and view. So we've got 4 for it. Now, how did that get created? It was created automatically for us by the database migration. Okay, so that's part of the migration engine to create those for us. I will point out that originally, as in like last spring when I taught this course, there wasn't automatically a permission for view. And then it kind of has to do with the history of Django a sort of blogging oriented tool. Okay. In blogs, everybody can see everything. It's a question of who can add and change things, right? Well, in database applications, that's not true. There's quite a few people who we don't want to be able to see things. So the nice thing here is that for each of these things, we have four permissions. When I taught this last year, we had to run a migration to create all the views, all the view permissions for each of the model classes. Don't have to do that anymore. As of 2.1, it's built in. Love that. Okay, so those are all the permissions that you can give to a group. I just want to point out that if we go back up in here, if we go up to authentication and authorization, we go to users, and we only have one user, tester. You can actually give permissions to users directly. Okay, this is not considered to be a good practice. Okay, you could accidentally give a particular user much higher authorization than you intended by, uh, oh, just you have to give each user a lot of individual permissions. Okay, probably better to probably better to do it at the level of the groups. Now, something we're going to see real soon as another thing you can do for users is you can assign them to a group. And we've got three groups. This tester is not going to be part of any of our groups. So we're going to leave that person alone. Okay? So this is pretty much what we wanted. Okay? We can we can see we can see the groups, and they're created the right way, and we're happy. So now we're going to go on to the next part of this part 2. And what are we going to do? Well, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to work by hand, and we're going to create the users that we need. Oh, I don't think we should have closed that. But let's take a look. Okay, I have another document that you'll find in the weekly schedule for your assignment. And these are the users that we want to create. Now, I put some effort into trying to do this with a migration, but it wasn't working. So we're doing it by hand again this semester. It's tricky to create users by sort of en masse with a migration. Certain things having to do with the passwords and stuff like that are tricky. And so you're just going to have to enter these. So all of us, including me, and now you, are going to create the same group of users on their system. Okay? And these are the ones we're going to create. We already have a tester. Leave a tester out there. That's fine. Okay? We're going to create sysadmin, clerk, scheduler, registrar, coworker. Okay, so we pretty well know what clerk, scheduler, and registrar are. The clerk is in the CI user group. The scheduler is in the CI scheduler group. The registrar is in the CI registrar group. The sysadmin is just a super user. Okay? They can do everything, including user administration. Okay, so you're going to need one of those. Okay, and as I mentioned a little while ago, any super user has got full authority in your full application. Okay, so you don't want a whole lot of those. And a coworker, let's say we had more than one application on this Django server. So this would be a user who is authorized on another application, okay? But not the course info application. So we want to explore what they could do. Okay, now quite a few people only put up a single app on a single Django server. But that's kind of wasteful. I could see how you might want two or three or four or five uh, on a single Django server. And if that's true, you need an authentication scheme that prevents users from accidentally being able to do things in the wrong app. Okay, so that's why we have the coworker. So we're going to create all of these. We'll do it together. Everybody's going to get this same password, lowercase secret in parens. Not really a secret, but it's great for testing. As you're going to see, when we add a user, there's a way to deactivate a user, so you can turn them off for a while without deleting them, and then turn them back on by saying they're active again. So all of our users are going to be active, and we're going to say that they're a member of our staff. Okay, so to do these applications, you have to have active on and staff on. Okay, and then the clerk is just a CI user. Okay. Oh, I see another error. We're going to change this. I'm going to pause and the error is going to go away. Get ready. And magically, my document is already fixed. So the scheme where everybody was a CI user is something that we changed in the current semester. So so you're either a CI user or you're a CI scheduler or you're a CI registrar. Okay? And a coworker isn't any of these things. They're not a super user. They aren't in the group CI user or CI scheduler or CI registrar. They're just active and on staff. Okay? So we're going to have them, they're only going to be able to do very minor things with regard to our application. In our application, we are going to allow people who are logged in and part of the community to see our about page. That's all they're going to be able to see. So that's the only thing that coworkers should be able to do when we get all the work done in part 3. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to put this aside, and you ought to open yours up somewhere you can see it. And then let's go to the server and go to admin, and let's create the users we're talking about. Okay, admin. All right. Okay, so let's log out here so we're all in the same place. So at this point, you should only have a tester, right? So let's bring in a log in with a tester, and it brings us back to our application. Let's go back to admin by typing that in. Okay, and now we have the groups that we want. That's great. Now let's get the users that we want. Okay, so go to users. Okay, and up here in the upper right, add a user. Okay, and the first one that we want is sysadmin. So let's add that. Sysadmin. Okay, and let's give them a password. I already did this in the same browser, but not on the same copy of the system. So that's going to have our secret password, and we're going to confirm that. Okay. Now we don't want to just save it or save and add another. We want to continue editing because we want to set the rest of the fields. So save and continue editing. Okay. We're not going to fill in all the name and the address and all that stuff. Those are nice to have, but they don't change uh, the abilities of the user. So if you remember here, if you looked, we want them to have that name, that password, the active, staff, super user. Okay, so that's what they're going to get. So active, staff, whoop, staff, come on, super user. That's it. Okay. They aren't in, the super user is not in any groups. They don't have any personal permissions. So where do we go? I'm going to go to save and add another. So now I'm back to the next one. Yeah, as you can see, I've already done this in this browser. So the next one is going to be called clerk. Okay. And it's going to get that secret password too. Okay. And it's going to get confirmed that secret password too. Okay. And then save and continue editing. Okay. Now we're going to go down. They're active. That's already checked. Staff, not a super user. No more super users. Okay. The clerk is in the CI registrar. Sorry, not. These aren't in the same order that they were in our document. They're in alphabetical order now. So CI user is the one we want. So click the right arrow, CI user, and then let's save and continue editing. Okay. Oh, no, we didn't. We want to save and add another. That's what we wanted. Okay. So with the sysadmin and the clerk, let's do the scheduler. Okay, scheduler. You're going to have to type it in. Okay, I'm going to put in my secret password with the parens and confirm it. Okay, save and continue editing. All right. They're active. We want them to be staff. All right. This is the, who is this? The scheduler. So their group is CI scheduler. Add that to the group, and we're done. Okay. Now, the reason why we have a group for this, not just individuals, is we could have several people who are authorized to be a scheduler or authorized to be a registrar or to be a clerk. Okay. Not just one person. So we've got that. Oh, we're supposed to do save and add another. Okay. Now we need the registrar. I don't see my registrar here, so let's do registrar password. My famous secret password. Okay, save and continue editing. Okay. So let's, they're active, they're staff, they're not a super user, they are in the user group CI registrar. Okay. They don't have any individual permissions. Save and add another. Okay. And the last one that I have here on my list, again, I hope you have yours open too, coworker. Okay, so let's add them. Username, I can click mine, but you're going to have to type it in. Coworker. Going to get the secret password like all the rest of them. Confirm that. Okay, save and continue editing. And come down here. They are part of staff. They're not a super user. And they're not part of any of our groups. They're part of some group for some other app that's on our Django server. Oh, okay. One that we haven't even created yet. Okay. So no groups, no individual permissions, just save. So here we are. We've got clerk, coworker, registrar, scheduler, sysadmin, and tester. So here's what I usually do when I'm testing here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I just added. So apart from tester, I should have 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that's great. So I have all those. Okay, and if we go to them, let's just go look at them. The clerk, if you look down at their groups, they're a CI user. Okay. The coworker, they're not part of any group. Okay. The registrar, they're in the CI registrar group. The scheduler, they're in the CI scheduler group. The sysadmin, they're not in any of those, but they're a super user. Okay, and tester we already had. So that's going to take care of all those. And we're set. Okay, now, what more do we need to do? Well, we've got one more migration that we need to do. And that is we need to connect up the user groups with their permissions. Okay, we've already seen a table of their permissions, right? It's right here. Okay, so we know what their permissions should be for each of these, right? So how did I do this? Well, I did it with a migration. Okay, so I need another migration. It's going to be migration 12. I'm going to copy it over and paste it into migrations. And this is a pretty complex program. And you should be grateful that I coded it and gave it to you, because this is going to be in our starter files as well. And this is just a classic data migration. Okay. Some of the stuff up top is a little different, but when we come down to the bottom, we've got here, we've got one operation. It's a run Python, add group permissions data, and we run it forward, and we've got a remove to run it backwards. Now I'm gonna leave this for you to study on your own, but this code took me a while to track down. I don't think it was all in the Pinkham book. I think I found some in the Pinkham book and some in other tutorials and some in the Django documentation. I did most of this coding when I taught this course last spring, and since we changed the structure of the database, I had to refresh it today. But essentially, each of our model classes has 4 permissions, okay? And so what we do up here in this early part is we create a data structure that has access to all these permission objects, okay? So the instructor permissions are all four permissions for the instructor. And that's true for instructor permission, student, period, year, semester, course, section, registration. Okay. Now I've got a whole group of them that is only the individual permission to view whatever the class is. So I've got a view permission for student, period, year, semester, course, section, and registration. And then what I do is I come down here and I chain the permissions together. This is how you aggregate them in the data structure. Okay, so we say for the CI user, they have the view permissions for all of the model classes. Okay, for the scheduler, we say that they have all four permissions for most, but only the view on the student and the registration. And then for the registrar, we say they have all four permissions for registration and student, and only the view for the rest of the model classes. Okay? And how do I get all that built? Well, when I come into the code that does the add group permissions or the remove group permissions, I build all those objects. I build them in this thing called group initialization list. Okay, so all that code that I had up there gets executed in order to create the data structure that we need to either add all these or back them all out. Okay, and it's just the typical data migration. Okay, so let's try to run this. Let's stop this. Okay, and show migrations. And it says we haven't applied 12. So let's go back. And the last one we said was run 11. So I'll change that to 12. It says it applied 12. All right. Let's just check the database. Okay. Bring up SQLite Studio. The table is group permissions. Okay. It had been empty. Okay. Now, if we go to data, you can see there are 48 entries. And if you look at our data, I did this because when I went to test this, I looked at this table, and I only had 36 entries in it, and it had to do with the changes I made in the structure of the database. So I came back and I fixed the code, and then I was expecting 48 entries, and I got 48. So that's what we want. And now let's just prove that we're able to back it out. So let's go back to 11, and it unapplied it. Okay, and look at the database again and do the refresh. No rows left. Okay, and then I'm just going to apply it. Go to number 12, and there it is. It's reapplied. Refresh the data. It's right there. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you what the implications for this are in the admin app. Got a couple of minutes before the start of an online lab, so we can do that. So let's go to the admin app. Okay, and we're logged in as a tester. That's fine. And As a tester, we can do anything we want. We've already seen that. Okay, so let's log out and let's log in as the clerk. Okay, and I've already got my password in. And the only problem is we go back to the right place in our app. Let's go back to admin. And as you go to all these, as the clerk, you can only see things. There are no controls to add or to change things. You can only see them. That's all you can do. Okay, so let's log out as the clerk, and let's log in as the scheduler. Okay, and as the scheduler, go back to admin. Go back to admin. When you go to courses, you can add courses, and you can change courses. You can do all that kind of stuff. Okay, so you should be able to do all that, but not to students or registration. So let's go to students. Nope, no controls on students. No controls on registrations. So that worked out just as we expected. So let's log out of here, okay, and let's go to registrar and log in. And again, we have to go back to admin to test that out. Okay. Okay, so for most of them, like courses, we shouldn't have the controls to do the majority of the function. Instructors, no, we should only be able to do registrations and students. So registrations, we can add a registration, and students, we can add a student, we can change a student, we can do any of those things. Okay, so pretty cool. Now let's log out again, and let's see what happens if we come in as the sysadmin. Well, we should be able to do anything to anything. That's just like our tester. That's what the tester is. They're a super user, right? So let's go right back here. And if you can go to courses, you can do anything you want. You can go to students, you can do anything you want. So that's just what we want for the sysadmin. And then the last one that we want to look at is the coworker. And remember, the coworker, they're not a super user, and they're not in any of our empowering user groups, so they shouldn't be able to do anything at all. So we log in as the coworker, and the coworkers can see the about page. That's fine. That's what we're going to let them do in our app. But if we go back to admin, they don't have permission to view or edit anything at all, because they're not a super user, so they can't see the users in the groups, and they don't have they aren't in any of our 3 application groups, so they can't see any of our application objects. They can't see anything that's exposed in the admin in the admin app. Okay, that's just what we wanted. Now, before we leave, I just want to demonstrate one more thing. Okay, what about in our app? Well, you can still do anything you want in our app. I don't care who you are. You can be a coworker. You can be a lowly coworker, right? You can go to instructors. You can create an instructor. You can go to semesters. You can create a semester. You could delete a semester. You could do anything. Why is it that we can do anything that we want to do here? Well, the reason that we can do anything that we want to do is that we haven't put the hooks into our application to restrict the ability of users to go to places in our system or to do things in our system on the basis of their permissions. That's what we're going to do in part 3. So think about that, and I'll see you in part 3. Bye bye.